Welcome to From the Shed End podcast, episode 49 with myself, T.Dot. Theo, how you doing?
Good. Thanks. Just had my second coffee of the day. It's been a busy work week for you as well, as we were just talking off air. But hopefully Chelsea don't ruin my weekend. Come 12:30 tomorrow.
Yeah. It's always bad playing those 12:30 kickoffs because depending on how, to be honest, maybe a draw is the better solution rather than a loss, but it just ruins the weekend. You know, you've got a whole weekend to sort of stew over the fact that you lost, and you've got to watch everyone else's games. And so, we've got to put in a performance, which we'll talk about later. But let's take it all the way back to confuse what day, Wednesday. Let's go back to Wednesday where we played second leg of our Carabao Cup against Spurs. Thomas Tuchel, after the game, said it was a performance that he wasn't really impressed with from a Chelsea perspective. But what was your thoughts going into that game and during the game as well?
Going into the game, I was relatively confident because I knew that Spurs needed 3 goals to go through to the final in 90 minutes, and that's them 3 goals without us scoring. And if they played anywhere near to the level they played at Stamford Bridge, I was even more confident that we'd qualify. And come 10 minutes, I thought we dominated possession. We got that early goal. I think it was in the 18th or 17th minute. I can't really remember. Rudiger header, and then it was kind of just straightforward from there. Spurs kind of thought they're not going to score. They didn't really look threatening. They had a few chances, but all the right VAR calls. I thought the ref was poor because from a blind eye you could tell straight away that all those calls were outside. The Rudiger challenge was outside the box, and even I didn't need a replay to see that Kepa won the ball cleanly. And then the Kane goal, that rule that any player behind the goalkeeper kind of counts as the goalkeeper or whatever it may be, then that rule made sense as well. So from that perspective, Spurs can't complain. Those rules were those goals were all fairly overruled and the penalties. So I don't think we should talk about or dwell on that for too long. But no, it was a kind of a dominant performance possession-wise, I felt. We didn't create that many chances, if I'm honest. I think bar the goal and maybe the Lukaku chance early on where Galini made a save, I don't really think there was that much to do. And then I'm quite pleased as well to see Kante and Silva get a couple, the minutes they needed maybe to put that fuel in the tank before the trip to the Etihad tomorrow, because I think that's much needed because both of those players are probably in line to start.
Yeah, definitely. And going into that game, I think we were full of confidence anyway after the back of the way we played against Spurs in the first leg as well. So I was confident going into it, and you do always have that slight apprehensive sort of feeling in the back of your mind that obviously you're playing away from home. I expected Spurs to come out and give us a game, give us something to work with, and they didn't really do that. Maybe that's because they were missing, Son wasn't in the team as well. I was speaking offline to someone and I was saying, you look at that Spurs team and it isn't a team that should worry you. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, from a Spurs perspective, but they're just not. Okay, bar maybe Son and Harry Kane. There's no one else in that team that you would probably see as a threat, see that you would want to take out that team. You'd love them to come to Chelsea. There's no one. So I thought going into that game, yes, I thought they were going to give us, something to work with, but yeah, we were on top of them straight away, and we controlled the possession, controlled the tempo of the game. Rudiger, who it's strange because if I go back to sort of episode 43 or 42, I can hear myself saying, he doesn't deserve that contract. He doesn't warrant that contract. But if he's talking about 200,000, 250,000, I think that's the going rate for a player of that quality. And if we're willing to lose that level of quality, for me, it's a no-brainer. Get him signed up, because not just for the goal, but for his defensive performance. You can see him orchestrating that defensive line as well. He's in conversation with Kepa. You mentioned around Kepa, around the tactical awareness, or if you want to call it that, but the awareness to make sure he's level with that defensive line. I can't remember who was behind him, whether it was Rudiger or Langsar.
Rudiger, I think
it was Rudiger. So just to have that awareness, it was a brilliant game, for us as well. And the fact he knows what he's doing as well, because if you notice, Kepa's the first one to raise his arm as soon as the goal goes in. So credit to us, man. We done well.
Yeah.
We done what we needed to do.
No, I have to agree around the Rudiger contract situation. I know we talk about this quite on a weekly basis now, but 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were talking about 400k a week. And all of a sudden now he's asking for 180, between 180 and 200, which sounds a lot more kind of reasonable and realistic. And if that's the money he's wanting, and if those are the type of performances that he's putting in, then I say give it to him. And like I said a few weeks ago as well, it's, between Rudiger and Christensen, which one would you want to take it to a Champions League final? Rudiger, 100% Rudiger. I know that Christensen's now, he's flirting with Dortmund, he's flirting with Barcelona, whereas Rudiger seems almost like the more likely one to sign that extension. So that's really pleasing to see. And yeah, I can just echo what you said about Kepa and his tactical awareness. And even I think he put in 2 fantastic saves from a header and, last minute shot. And then last thing I wanted to ask you actually is around the lineup, because it was, again, one of those lineups where you're looking at it and you're struggling to work out, are we playing with wing? Who's where? Are we playing with wing backs? Where is Malang Sarr? But no, I think we have to talk about Malang Sarr as well, because he played in left back and I thought he was fantastic. He was winding up Giovanni Lo Celso as well from time to time, which is what we like to see during those type of London derbies. And he's playing with a lot more confidence now, a lot more ease. He's starting to, I think, gel into this Tuchel system, and having a player like Rudiger alongside him, in that back 4, or if it's a back 3, because I think he will start in a back 3 tomorrow against City, probably brings the best out of him as well.
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to what we were saying about Antonio Rudiger, and I think having someone like him, even a Thiago Silva, you're talking about 2 quality centre backs, and Malang Sarr's coming into that sort of form that we hope to see of him, very similar to Saul Niguez. We talk about these kind of players and how long it's taken them to adapt, and slowly but surely we're seeing that with Malang Sarr as well. And I was impressed with him. I thought he loves, you can tell that he loves to get forward. He didn't look out of sorts, playing on that left side as well. So I was impressed with him. I thought he done what he needed to do. He was calm on the ball. He didn't look like he was in a panic at any point. And yeah, he just dealt with what he needed to deal with. So, hopefully, we can continue that. Obviously now Christensen's got been, we told earlier in the press conference that Christensen's got COVID, so you'd expect potentially maybe Malang Sarr, over the next couple of games or so, might get a bit more of a run out as well in that team.
Yeah, we could probably get to our predicted lineups when we talk about City, but I think tomorrow we're probably talking about a back 3 of Malang Sarr and those 2 experienced players, which we just mentioned, in Silva and Rudiger, with Alonso and Azpi on the wing backs. Because if you're playing a back 4, I would not feel comfortable playing City with Alonso and Azpi, in the full-back positions. I don't think that suits them as well as it used to maybe back in 2017 or, when we a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think given the Christensen COVID situation and the Chalobah injury, I think Sarr probably will start at the Etihad tomorrow.
Yeah, I have to agree. Before we get to the Etihad, we've got to pass Wembley. So let's talk about it, because obviously we are in the final. I think it's the 27th of February, which is the final. Now, I watched the Arsenal-Liverpool game yesterday, and yes, okay, let's get the caveats out there first. So obviously they didn't have Mane, they didn't have Salah, but they still had their usual back 4. They still had Jordan Henderson, who they love to rave about. Surprise Milner starts when you've got Curtis Jones on the bench, but it's another story. They still had Minamino and Firmino as well. They still had the quality. It wasn't kids playing against Arsenal, is what I suppose I'm saying. And they did have 10 men for the best part of 45 minutes. So going into that final, obviously we're there, we've done our job. But out of those 2 teams, who would you prefer to play, I suppose? Who can you see going through to the finals? Probably the better question.
Well, it's a tricky one, because when I look at finals, I always think, which team would I almost rather lose against? That's the kind of logic sometimes I use. And
Arsenal then. Well, I don't know. It's different for you, because I'd say Liverpool. You'd say Arsenal.
I've got my flatmate who's upstairs and he's an Arsenal fan. So I think for me, it'd have to be probably Liverpool in that case. I don't live up north like you, so it's a different one. Yeah. But after seeing yesterday's performance, they were both quite poor. They were both very poor. Yes, Arsenal defended well with 10 men. And yes, probably Liverpool will, come February, have Salah and Mane back. But then we saw that, for more than 45 minutes, we were the better team against Liverpool at Stamford Bridge a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And I think, the teams won't be that much different in that League Cup final come February 27th. So that being said, I think I'd rather play Liverpool. And also I think Arsenal almost relish these type of games, cup finals or the FA Cup or League Cup. They'll just give it their all. And they were missing some key players yesterday as well. The likes of Odegaard, Smith Rowe. yes, I want to say Aubameyang, but he'll probably be out in Italy come February. But no, I think it's a tricky one. I think given the recent form of both teams, you'd fancy Chelsea to beat both of them. But I'm going to say I'd rather play Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, I think the game would be more entertaining if it's Chelsea Liverpool, from my perspective anyway. Obviously, living up north, but if I'm honest, I can see Arsenal going through. I can see Arsenal going through. The second leg's next Thursday, I think. So that obviously rules out a Mane or a Salah coming back into that game. I just think Arsenal. I think you just hit the nail on the head. Arsenal love these sort of competitions. They love when they're sort of the underdog. They go into these games and they actually do. They've done well to, not to say that they were, challenged in an attacking position from Liverpool yesterday, but they still done well with 10 men. And I think to do that against Liverpool, albeit a weakened Liverpool team going forward, I can see them. I can see them doing it. I really can. I think they'll relish playing us as well, as much as Liverpool will, but I think it would mean a lot more to Arsenal. They done it in the FA Cup to us a few seasons ago as well. So, in my opinion, it would probably make for the better final if it was Liverpool Chelsea. But I can see Arsenal going through, and I'm just glad we've got our ticket there. We're booked in already. So, I think it'll be an interesting final, regardless of who gets through. I think it's going to be interesting anyway.
Yeah, I mean, even when you looked at the two semi-finals of Chelsea-Tottenham and Liverpool-Arsenal, it was always going to be an entertaining final, regardless of who made it through. So whether it's City or Arsenal, we're going to have to play our best footy and hopefully be lifting that cup on the 27th of February.
Yep, definitely. And one person that might actually make a difference for us, Kenedy. Let's talk about Kenedy, who's been recalled from his loan. So it's a strange one, because when I read last week around his loan deal with, I think it was Flamengo, and there was an option to buy at the end of the loan deal, which I'm pretty sure they were keen on doing. Is this loan recall just a case of the fact that we've lost out, Ben Chilwell? We're struggling with sort of Reece James at that position as well. Aspie obviously is another one who is cover for right wing back as well. But in terms of left side, the options were obviously Emerson, Maatsen, or go out and buy someone. So is this the best alternative from a Chelsea perspective that we can hope for? Thomas Tuchel's almost come out today to say that he has got, he's not the solution, but he is someone that, we're happy to have back at the club. So do you think he's got a role to play in the second half of the season?
Well, a few days ago when Fabrizio Romano, whoever it was on Twitter, mentioned that we were calling Kenedy, but it was to loan him out again because Flamengo didn't trigger that option to buy him permanently at the end of the season. I thought, okay, this is typical Marina, wanting to make money from a player. Business, call him back in January and then loan him back out to a Spanish team, an Italian team, and hopefully they'll buy him permanently come the summer. Whereas after hearing what Tuchel had to say in his press conference today, I'm thinking he's going to remain a Chelsea player until the end of the season. And if I'm completely honest, I'm actually really pleased with it. I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Give us your thoughts. Why?
Because when he was played at fullback, I think under Mourinho or Gus Hiddink in his first season, he's not a fullback. He was going up the pitch. He was challenged. He was taking players on. I remember watching him play at left back against PSG at Stamford Bridge. And, I remember seeing him try to dribble past Verratti, trying to dribble past whoever it was on the left-hand side. I'm thinking to myself, this guy's not a fullback. He's a winger or he's a left wing back. And I think that's why, this Tuchel system is perfect for him. And I think when Tuchel said, if we don't get Emerson back, I've got a plan B. I think Kenedy was that plan B. And I think we have to remember he's not going to be playing every single game. Alonso's there for that until Chilwell's back, but he'll be playing, those Plymouth Argyle games where, to keep Alonso free from injuries. He'll be playing the odds, maybe midweek game, if we really need to give, some first team players a rest. And I'm excited at the prospect. And we have to remember as well, I think he did work very briefly under Tuchel in pre-season. So Tuchel must have seen something in him to want to bring him back. And also a lot of these players that come back to Tuchel perform, better to the level they were last season. So I think he'll probably get better under Tuchel, if anything, like a Malang Sarr, like a Sarnaguez, like a Chaloba. So I am excited to see him for the next 6 months.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm not entirely disappointed. I'm not disappointed. He's a Chelsea player, and when a Chelsea player returns, it's only a good thing. And I always said I didn't really see the point in going out and buying a left back or a defensive player, because we've got enough cover when we've got all these injuries out of the way. We've got enough cover there already, so it didn't make any sense for me to go out and get Luca Dean or anyone else, Kieran Trippier, anyone else that we might have been linked with. But I do think it's interesting because obviously Leon have come out today and said that Emerson, they've had their press conference and Emerson's 100% staying at the club. So it tells you we missed a trick. First of all, obviously we missed a trick in that contract, and I think going forward that's something that needs to be addressed from a business perspective, because this could happen again. With COVID, this could happen numerous times across the whole sort of playing field. So I think that's a massive trick that we missed there. But on the flip side of that, you also have to think about Emerson, and we always expect loyalty from players, or we ask players to be loyal. But when we had Alonso, we had Chilwell, no one cared about Emerson. We wanted him almost at the club, and I can say that hand on heart that I didn't want him at the club. He wasn't someone that I was happy to have in the club, because I didn't see him as good enough. So to see a lot of this Chelsea fan base, mainly on Twitter, I have to say, not the ones that probably go to games, but the ones that are on Twitter crying for Emerson to come back, they're the same ones that didn't want him there. So I understand probably he wants to stay. I'm happy with Kenedy coming back. I think you're right. I think he provides that cover in terms of being able to provide cover for Alonso. So yeah, and to be fair, he's not that bad. I just don't think he's had a run of games. He hasn't had the run of games as an Alonso or Chilwell's had in that position. So at Chelsea. So we have to see. We have to see what can happen. I'm not entirely upset about it.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head when you spoke about Emerson. We have to remember he was third choice behind Chilwell and Alonso, and from the manager, from the fans, he would have felt underappreciated and undervalued, and that's what I kind of said in a couple episodes back. So I don't blame him for wanting to stay at Lyon and maybe even signing there permanently come the summer. And regarding Kenedy, he's not that bad. I completely agree. I remember when he was on a trial at Chelsea in pre-season, he played Barcelona, I think, in the US. And I was looking at this guy thinking, this guy's a gem. He was, I think we still had the option to sign him permanently. And I was thinking we actually got ourselves a gem here in Kenedy, and then things didn't really work out for him. He went on loan a few times to Watford, Newcastle. He played the odd cup game. But in the times he has played for Chelsea, he's looked decent, and he's played under a lot of managers, Mourinho, Hiddink, Conte. He's come back now. He's under, I think he was even on the bench for Lampard against Man United in his first game of the season. So he's played under a lot of managers, but if he gets him maybe more regular game time or trains more regularly with the first team, and like we keep speaking about with Tuchel, regardless of your squad number, where you've come from your previous loan, you'll get minutes. You will get minutes. We've seen that with Baker, we've seen that with Sarr, we've seen that with Barkley. So I think he will get game time, and if he does want a future at Chelsea, which I still don't really know, it probably still is up in the air. But the next 6 months will probably determine that.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And I think he's in the right position to do that. I think it's a win-win. If he isn't good enough, or he doesn't perform, or he wants to move, then at least he's had 4 or 5 months to put himself in a shop window to try and get a move somewhere where he's going to get regular football. But if he does come on and he shows that quality that we hope he's got inside him, then he stays at the club, and he's another option to have besides Ben Chilwell and Alonso as well. So it can only be a good thing. I think for me, the key thing now, if he stays, the key thing for me is either locking down Rudiger's deal, Christensen as well, of course. I still want him to stay, but I think and obviously Aspie. Aspie's the big one. I think if we can keep him maybe just for another season, a season or two, I think it'll be a year is what I think is being offered to him. He wants to.
Yeah.
Then I think we either make the exception for him, which again I think we have to. He's not just a club captain, but he's in my eyes, he's a club legend. He's someone who's took the club to a next level, alongside what John Terry did while he was captain as well. So I think we've got to make an exception for Aspilicueta. I think he deserves it as well. So that's
Yeah.
for me, Kenedy and Emerson. I'm glad that's kind of been put to bed, but we need to focus on those centre backs now
Yeah.
as well.
One last thing I'll say just around this Kenedy situation, and I think you just touched upon it briefly, is we haven't paid the 4 million clause to bring Emerson back, or compensation, or whatever value was quoted. We haven't gone into the transfer market and signed a Digne, Dest, or a Trippier. And that being said, we've used our own resources and the players that we've got out on loan, in Kenedy. We've probably saved a good, 20 million or 10 million or whatever in value it could have been. Invest that money in giving Rudiger that contract, giving Aspi that contract, or maybe even negotiating a better contract for Christensen.
Yeah, and that's probably what it's all boiled down to. That is the plan B. The plan B is bring back Kenedy and use that money that's now surplus to an extent and put it in towards a wage packet for one of those players that need to sign. But we've got to get one of them over the line. Luckily, they're still here for Saturday's game. Obviously, we've got a big game coming up Saturday afternoon, 12:30, Manchester City. Now, Thomas Tuchel did mention in the press conference that obviously he was asked the question, what went wrong last time when we played Man City at the Bridge? And if we're honest, I think he was honest. He said basically that he got his tactics wrong, and he made it difficult for us to have that build-up play, which you need against certain teams, especially City. What can you see different? We talked about lineup slightly, but what do you expect different from this game as opposed to the one at the Bridge?
I think you would expect us to have learned from our mistakes in that game in September at Stamford Bridge. We never really looked like we wanted to win that game. We kind of just let City control it and play their football, and I can't see us replicating that type of performance tomorrow at the Etihad. So I feel we would have learned from our mistakes, and I also feel, I want to say it, but we've kind of shown a bit more form in the last couple since January than we were showing in December, whether that's players returning from injury, COVID, or just the manager changing his system a little. I think that's quite reassuring to see. And maybe like we always say of Guardiola, he does overthink things. The only game against Tuchel that he won was that one in the Premier League this season. The last 3 encounters last season were all victories for Chelsea, in the Champions League final, in the FA Cup semi-final, and in the Premier League at the Etihad. So, Tuchel knows how to beat the City side. I do think that they're the best team in the world right now, Man City. They would have had a rest as well midweek, so that probably puts them as the favourites. But I think Tuchel, one manager that knows how to adjust their tactics, to face these big teams is Thomas Tuchel. And like we mentioned, our back line will look a bit different, maybe with Sera featuring. But that being said, I still think he's a more than capable player, like he's proved in recent weeks. And I think it will be a good performance from us. I don't know if we've got enough to win, but we'll see.
I think it's going to be a totally different game. I think I agree with you. I think that game at the Bridge, it was awful. If we're honest, we were pegged back for 90 minutes. Let's say, we didn't get out of our own box for the majority of the game. So I think it's a game that we're going to need to see a whole shift in attitude. I think from the players and obviously from what Tuchel's done with them over the last couple of weeks. And like you just mentioned, we've seen since that game at the Bridge that we can play some good football. We were 2-0 down against Liverpool. We brought it back to 2-2. So I'm gonna go out there and say I think we can beat City. I think we can beat them. I think it's probably done us a favour that we've played that game in a week. I think regardless that we haven't really had a rest, I think sometimes rest is great, but I think if you can keep that momentum going like we have, we've played quite a congested fixture list over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I think that might help us in the long run. Yes, I think obviously the Christensen COVID issue is a slight problem, but I think Malang Sarr showing that he can actually play in that position as well. I think we still need to see a bit more from Lukaku, if I'm honest. I think, he hasn't necessarily, since obviously the interview and all that stuff, he hasn't really, lit up the Premier League. He hasn't done what we expected him to do. And I think, going into a game like this, as big as this as well, I think this is his time to show not just the Premier League, but Chelsea fans what he can actually do. And yeah, I think we need more from him. I think the front three for me would probably be Pulisic, Mason Mount. I'd put up there as well. I'd have Kovacic and Kante in the middle. I'd obviously have Thiago Silva, Rudiger, Malang Sarr back three, and then Alonso and Aspi on the right as well. So, and obviously Kepa, who we've spoken about. I think it's a good test for him. I think obviously we spoke about him in League Cup, and he didn't play in the FA Cup, but the League Cup games, this is a big test for him now. This is a different ball game, playing against Man City. So it'd be interesting to see how he performs, if he can take that into a Premier League game, which I think he can. I think it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'd have to agree regarding Kepa. We used to speak a lot last season when he played, it would make the fans a little nervous, but I don't think there's any nerves, amongst the fan base now when he plays. And regarding Lukaku, you're spot on. I think after that interview, all the Chelsea fans expected him to play with almost a lot of frustration, almost unleash that frustration onto the pitch, given what's happened. But it just almost looked like he's just kind of gone back to that form that he had around October time, where he looks a bit lost on the pitch. So he needs to change that up, and the reason we signed him is to score goals in these big games against, title contenders. So I think he will start tomorrow, and I'm expecting a big game from him. And by big game, I mean a goal, at least a goal.
I want 2 goals and an assist at least. If I'm being realistic, I expect at least a goal. He's going to be pivotal in that front three as well, because Ruben Dias is a very good centre back. We know what Man City are like as well, so he's going to be pivotal tomorrow. He's got to be on his game. He's got to be what we need from him as well. But also the two in midfield is going to be key. I think obviously Kante coming back from COVID and getting those minutes, I think in midweek will be crucial. Kovacic, since even before the Liverpool game, he's been playing superb. So he's been brilliant. If he can keep that form going with Kante next to him as well, I don't see why we can't beat them. So I'm going to ask you for your prediction, which we like to do on here. But what would you go for?
It's one of those games where you would take a draw before kickoff, but then given how we perform, maybe you're like, okay, no, actually we can win this. But I'm going to keep my feet on the ground and say, I think we'll draw. I think 1-1.
I think we're going to win, and maybe that's because I'm just in one of those moods, and I feel optimistic. But I think we're going to win. I think like I said, I think the fact that we've played, first leg of the League Cup, then we had the FA Cup, albeit we rested a few of the players, still a strong squad. We've played the second leg of the Carabao Cup, and then we're going into this big game. I think it just keeps that momentum going. And I think sometimes if you do have that break, not to say that, it's City, City can put out 2 11s, so it doesn't really matter for them. But for us, I think we keep that momentum going. I can see us winning maybe 2-1. I think we'll get a 2-1 win. I think, like I said, Lukaku will get a goal. Maybe a strange one. Maybe like an Aspi, someone who just doesn't really get on the score sheet as much, might score. Maybe a Malang Sarr. We don't know. We've raved about him all week, so maybe he gets a goal to end his week. But I'm going to go 2-1. I think maybe they might score first, and we'll get back in. I think it'd be tough for us. It's City, so I think they'll definitely give us a game very similar to what they did at the Bridge. But I think Tuchel will have learned from that mistake, and hopefully we'll see that tomorrow.
It's one of those games where, yes, we're Chelsea. We have to remain optimistic, but you still have to lower your expectations a little and just hope for the best. But no, I do agree. A win is possible. A win is possible. Like I mentioned, Tuchel's record against Guardiola, and the players. If we play anywhere near to that level we show against Liverpool in that end of that first half, then I think that's the type of football that can make us beat anyone. So I'll stick with 1-1 simply because, like I said, I'd take a draw, but I'm kind of happy to see you being optimistic.
Yeah. Someone has to be on the podcast today. But no, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, early kickoffs are never my favourites. I hate them with a passion. It ruins it can ruin the weekend. So hopefully we get the 3 points, and yeah, we've got to build on that now. And my final question, I suppose, to you: if we do win, big if, but if we do win, does that mean that the title race is back on?
Ask me that on Monday.
Yeah.
If we win and we stay clear of injuries, then yes.
There we go. You heard it here first. This has been episode 49 from the Shed End podcast. As always, we appreciate everyone who is listening. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter. So the Twitter account is at From the Shed End. That's all one word. And Instagram as well. You can follow us at From the Shed End with underscores between each of the words. So make sure you give us a like on there as well, and make sure you subscribe. I know I've just said that, but please subscribe to the channel. It does mean a lot to us as well. Makes it worthwhile. So 50th episode next week. We need to do something different. We're gonna have a think about that and try and make sure it's a special one. But 50 episodes for you already. It doesn't seem like only yesterday we started it.
It's flown by ever since that West Brom defeat back in April when we covered the first episode.
Is that when we started?
I think so. A bad one to start off with, but we've covered the Champions League final and some good victories along the way.
We haven't had many losses since then, to be fair. If we're being honest, we haven't had that many losses compared to other teams, and maybe we haven't recorded when we've.
Yeah, when we do lose, we just avoid recording. I think probably why.
But no, we're definitely going to be back next week, 50th episode. So for anyone who has listened, thank you for listening, and make sure you join us next week for another episode of From the Shed End podcast.